You and I know genius hides. Evelyn signed away this worn-down city garage in 3 seconds. She didn't check the address, didn't ask who the owner was, and certainly didn't hesitate. To her, it was just another tiny box erased from a massive corporate expansion plan. Her pen kept moving. She had 46 more routine acquisitions to sign before her lunch. But breakthroughs happen in the shadows. Behind those dusty walls waited a secret Elijah had guarded for 6 years. A fully operational automotive engine prototype, and hidden right alongside it. All the evidence proving Evelyn's $2 billion auto empire was built on a foundation that was never truly hers. What happens when the most powerful executive in the boardroom finally faces undeniable proof that she simply cannot ignore or explain away? The auto shop sat on the corner of a totally forgotten, run-down industrial block, wedged between a boarded-up print shop and a rusty freight depot running just 3 days a week. From the outside, the forgotten shop announced nothing. A hand-painted sign above the heavy steel door simply read Elijah's Auto, Independent Engine Service. The painted letters were slightly uneven. The sort of sign a single dad paints himself on a Saturday because paying a professional misses the whole point. Just one single power line connected to the overlooked building. A lone noisy exhaust fan was mounted into the sidewall, and a sliver of fluorescent light glowed beneath the door when Elijah showed up long before sunrise every single morning. Inside, the layout was tight but structured in a way that had nothing to do with basic tidiness and everything to do with absolute precision. Essential mechanic tools hung by function along wooden pegboard racks, each one outlined in permanent marker so a missing wrench was obvious to him right away. Running quietly along the back wall, a handwritten, color-coded chart tracked engine performance metrics across a wide range of running temperatures. The exact kind of visual guide a hidden genius makes when the complex automotive design in his head demands a physical reference. Nothing inside this humble shop was new, yet absolutely everything worked perfectly. Stick with me here. On the ordinary morning that sparked absolutely everything, Elijah was tracking down a complex transmission failure on a newer SUV. It belonged to a contractor who pushed that heavy truck until the grinding gears could not be ignored anymore. 3 flashy repair shops had already inspected the vehicle and demanded a complete, expensive assembly replacement. Elijah just listened to the heavy engine idle for 40 seconds. He placed one bare hand flat across the warm valve cover. Then he walked over to his bench, pulling out a hand-drawn schematic he had drafted purely from memory and careful measurements gathered over 2 long years of solo diagnostic testing. He circled one tiny overlooked part, a $17 pressure relief valve that takes 20 minutes to swap out. The anxious, tired contractor watched closely from the open doorway, wearing the exact look of someone struggling to believe the sheer mechanical skill he was witnessing. Elijah didn't brag, and he certainly didn't over-explain his brilliant method. He just offered to run a test after the fix, letting the flawless engine performance speak for itself. But here's what we usually overlook, and what no paying customer ever thought to ask about. The entire section of the workspace hidden behind a thick canvas curtain, stretching floor to ceiling across the back wall. Secured with a heavy padlock, unlabeled and completely overlooked. Right there on the workbench near the tiny office, a folded envelope leaned against an old desk lamp. The sleek Meridian Motors corporate logo was stamped in dark blue on the top corner. Small, cold, and precise. Elijah got that threat 4 days ago, tearing it open that very same night. Let's start right here. He scanned the 3 pages of legal threats, then folded them neatly. He stared at the eviction notice like a dark storm cloud he knew was coming all along. No panic, no shock, just quiet acceptance. To understand why, we go back 6 years to a glass boardroom inside the towering Meridian headquarters. Evelyn, the powerful CEO, stood at the head of a massive table. She stared down at this grease-stained mechanic like a stubborn math error that simply had no business being on her pristine ledger. Her voice was completely cold and steady. "You know the reason," she stated. It wasn't an apology, just a hard fact. Elijah soaked in those harsh words for 1 second, then stood up. He quietly pushed his heavy chair away, turned his back, and walked right out. He didn't fight it. Even back then, he knew corporate suits never listened to the little guy. Evelyn just wanted him tossed out on the street, and he was leaving. but she completely overlooked the true genius he carried out that boardroom door. Later that night, Elijah made black coffee and sat completely still at his dusty workbench. Finally, he got up, walked to a locked back room, and stared at his hidden secret. He studied the unfinished prototype for 2 full minutes, grabbed his mug, and started plotting. Meanwhile, the 42nd floor at Meridian Motors was built strictly to make wealthy investors feel powerful and deeply important. Massive glass windows faced the setting sun, pouring golden afternoon light across a room where true innovation was rarely ever born. They bought furniture that looked highly serious rather than flashy, a snobby corporate illusion costing an absolute fortune. Now let's watch how their expansion was. Formally pitched to the board and lead financial underwriting team. Evelyn stood right in the center, flawlessly reciting an aggressive 4-page summary she had memorized. She only glanced down once when a rich board member demanded a specific hard number. The corporate pitch ran 41 minutes, and when she finally finished, 3 out of 5 major institutional investors had verbally agreed to heavily back their upcoming initial public stock offering. They were talking about $2 billion. And the star of the show was an adaptive compression engine. They called it ACE, a groundbreaking combustion technology that Meridian had aggressively claimed and patented. A design delivering 31% better fuel efficiency than standard engines across almost every extreme temperature. They locked down the patent in 44 global markets. Financial teams had independently checked out the intellectual property claims. It looked flawless, it seemed perfectly legal. Everyone in that shiny room believed the brilliant engine design belonged entirely to Meridian. Sitting far down the table was Lucas, playing the proud role of Chief Technical Officer. He walked them through the mass manufacturing roadmap for ACE. He spoke with the slick, rehearsed confidence of a guy completely used to faking it, bridging the gap between heavy technical jargon and easy billion-dollar investor hype. But halfway through his slick pitch, the big screen lit up with a complex engineering diagram of the engine core, the intricate valve timing, the compression housing, the brilliant thermal architecture Elijah had actually built. Lucas was pointing blindly at the slide when he stared down at his stolen notebook. Just one guilty second. He found his notes and kept talking. In that room, nobody ever notices the real details. The meeting's second half pivoted to their massive infrastructure expansion plan, buying up forgotten plots along the outer belt to build a flashy research and development campus. The legal team coldly laid out the demolition plans, a schedule for bulldozing properties, mostly forgotten old warehouses, small independent workshops and faded commercial units, 47 overlooked addresses total. Evelyn grabbed the thick packet and flipped straight to the signature page. First page, 4 commercial warehouse leases, she quickly signed. Second page, 9 light industrial units, she signed again. Third page, line 11, a corner spot in the outer district, officially listed as Elijah's Auto Independent Engine Service. She signed and moved to line 12 without looking up. Just another easily overlooked dirt lot. After the meeting finally cleared out, she stood alone by the massive window, staring at the hazy outer district. You and I know that's where the magic hides. Only 3 weeks until the stock offering, she had done her job. She never gave that small garage a second thought. She had already moved on. 2 days later, a sleek black sedan pulled up at 9:22 in the morning. The guy who stepped out wore a crisp gray suit and carried a flat leather briefcase. He marched straight up to the garage, walking with that slow, arrogant confidence of a man used to handing bad news to struggling people. A guy who stopped expecting resistance long ago. He quickly introduced himself as a representative from the Meridian Property Acquisition Legal Division. He tossed 3 folded pages onto the grease-stained workbench, completely uninvited. Then he coldly explained the garage was being seized under their new commercial expansion easement. The current occupant had exactly 72 hours to pack up and surrender the entire premises. They offered a tiny payout based on the lowest municipal assessed value, and any desperate appeal filed after signing would be completely thrown out. He dropped his shiny business card on top of the paperwork and just waited. Elijah read all 3 pages standing right there. He didn't rush. He slowly turned the second page, reading all the way to the very bottom. He carefully folded the paperwork along the original creases, set it down, and studied the suit. "Who signed this order?" he asked quietly. The guy smirked. "Executive authorization, the full board." Elijah just nodded once. "All right," he said. The clueless representative grabbed his briefcase and walked out. After the black sedan finally sped off, Elijah stood perfectly still. "Let's stay here and watch." The cheap fluorescent light above his messy workbench hummed faintly. Outside, a big truck rumbled down the street. The ordinary world kept spinning like nothing had changed, but inside his path was crystal clear. Like a landscape when the morning fog finally lifts, nothing changed, just suddenly, clearly visible. He walked back to a stained canvas curtain hiding the rear of the garage. He unlocked the padlock, yanked the curtain aside, and stepped inside. The hidden room was tiny, maybe 15 square meters total. Right in the center, bolted to a hand-welded steel test stand, sat the engine. Not pretty like a showroom car, but you and I know this raw, overlooked beast changes everything. Let's look at this direct injection setup with a variable compression housing. Brilliant adaptive valve timing architecture. And a thermal management system you won't find printed in any published engineering textbook anywhere. This overlooked masterpiece Elijah now stood quietly beside. Around this dusty room, cheap shelves held 14 bound technical journals. Each spine marked by date in his scrawl, the oldest dating back 7 years. Tucked on a cramped work table against the back wall. A beat-up desktop and an old external drive stored the complete engine development history. Every single test run, every measurement, iteration, and raw result. Elijah didn't build this to fight back against Meridian and their corporate greed. He built this purely because the mechanical challenge fascinated him. Because the brilliant answer lived in his head long before he had cash to build it. And when he finally gathered just enough free time and basic tools, he built it slowly, right here in the shadows, not from paranoia but perfect precision. He just needed absolute certainty before showing this massive breakthrough. But now a billionaire CEO had forced his hand entirely. Sitting on a greasy stool next to his motor, he grabbed his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in almost 2 years. Diana picked up on the second ring. Her voice was sharp, like someone trained to wake up fast and expect the worst. Elijah skipped the small talk completely. "They're tearing down my garage," he told her plainly. "That hidden engine prototype I mentioned to you 3 years ago. It's here, perfectly intact. I have 72 hours left. Do you want to see it?" The silence on Diana's end lasted exactly 3 seconds. "When?" she finally asked. "Stick with me." She was a financial reporter who had spent the better part of 2 years building an investment fraud case against the giant Meridian Motors, tracking huge inconsistencies between the declared corporate timeline for ACE and the actual internal project records she had quietly obtained through a trusted source who no longer worked at the company. She had enough to suspect massive fraud, but not enough hard evidence to publish. When Elijah first contacted her from his struggling shop 3 years earlier, she listened closely, took notes, and told him a good story just wasn't enough. She needed cold, hard physical evidence that independent engineering experts could actually test and verify. He swore the hidden proof existed, she just had to be patient. That patience now had a strict 72-hour window. Diana pulled up to his rundown garage the next morning before the city even woke. Elijah walked her through the messy shop straight to a dirty back curtain, pulled it away, and stepped aside. She slowly walked into the hidden space and stared at the engine on its rusty test stand for nearly a full minute, totally speechless. Then she dropped her bag onto the cluttered work table and grabbed her laptop and opened a web page she had visited so often it loaded before she even finished typing the address. The official public filing page for Meridian's big ACE patent registration. She started reading the corporate document out loud while Elijah stood right beside her. Neither said much for the first 20 solid minutes. Diana read the corporate specs softly. Elijah pointed to his gritty journals, proving what you and I know, true genius hides in overlooked places. You'd easily overlook this adaptive compression housing. But the geometry matched perfectly, right down to the primary seal ring's angular variance. That brilliant valve timing sequence. The exact same release architecture. It matched the same thermal triggers from the corporate patent, using the exact words this struggling dad wrote in his dusty journal 4 years earlier. Even the fuel calibration profile. A setup so uniquely specific, nobody could have just stumbled onto it randomly. It all came straight from the earliest of 14 worn hand-bound journals. Diana stopped typing. She stared at this overlooked masterpiece, then back at Elijah. "Walk me through the timeline," she said. He laid it out simply, unpolished. 7 years back, while working a senior engineering job over at Meridian, he started building this revolutionary engine concept on his own, after hours, using his own rusted tools in a cheap hidden garage across town. This massive tech breakthrough was his alone. He filed that very first patent application exactly 5 years ago today. They rejected it, claiming this nobody lacked the proper supporting paperwork. 14 months later, he filed an expanded application, but before they even processed that second attempt, Meridian fired him, claiming he stole their precious corporate intellectual property. His firing was brutal, swift, and absolute. That heavy accusation froze him legally while Meridian's ruthless corporate lawyers swooped in. 18 months after firing him, Meridian got their stolen engine patent approved. Elijah's second try had, at some point during that whole messy timeline, been flagged in the federal system as permanently withdrawn. He never withdrew anything. Diana just kept typing, eyes locked. "Who at Meridian could access that original filing?" she asked. Elijah sighed. "Someone who knew it was there and had enough power to make it vanish before it caused them trouble. You and I still couldn't say who did it, not from this messy garage. But the what and the when were suddenly crystal clear. Hidden in those greasy shelves and a cheap hard drive was a billion-dollar truth. Now time was the enemy. This hidden physical prototype was their only real legal weapon. A simple digital file alone could easily be dismissed as a fake copy built from their corporate patents. Without this overlooked chunk of metal, slick corporate lawyers would destroy his entire case. Diana checked the ticking clock right there on her screen. Barely 48 hours left before he lost this garage forever. "I need a name," she urged, "an insider who will put this on the record. Without a witness, court takes years. Their IPO goes live in 3 weeks. Elijah leaned on the splintered doorframe, quietly studying his forgotten masterpiece for a moment. "I know someone who knows it all," he muttered. "He's never spoken up before." "I doubt he'll start now." Diana snapped her laptop shut. "Then we use what we've got. We move this incredible machine out tomorrow night." But the demolition crew showed up at 7:40 the next morning, 4 full hours before the deadline they gave this struggling dad. That lead van carried 2 slick reps from Meridian's greedy property division, plus 1 city contracted compliance officer. Picture this: behind the van idled a flatbed and 2 work vehicles. The crew chief held a clipboard, projecting a fake upbeat corporate energy that completely ignored the reality. Whether the people losing their space actually wanted to go. But Elijah, the overlooked single dad, was already waiting by the rolling garage door. He wore his usual grease-stained canvas trousers and a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up. His heavy work boots were worn pale from years of unseen, grinding labor. He looked like a guy who had been awake for hours, quietly deciding exactly how he was going to handle this entire morning. The corporate compliance officer approached first. Following strict corporate protocol, he read aloud from a printed property acquisition order. Elijah listened closely, completely silent. When the suit finally finished talking, Elijah calmly pointed out a massive procedural flaw hidden right inside their shiny corporate enforcement notice. He had quietly filed a formal objection through the city administrative system late last night, and according to local municipal code, they could not force an eviction while an objection remained pending without a written ruling. He pulled the small filing confirmation right from his pocket, folded just once, and handed it over with zero emotion. The officer stared at the paper, glared at Elijah, checked the document again, and nervously stepped away to make a quick phone call. The demolition crew waited by their trucks while Elijah guarded his garage door. Nobody dared to speak across the pavement. It was a tense 10 minutes. Then the second vehicle rolled up, a sleek black corporate sedan. The powerful CEO Lucas stepped out from the passenger side. He paused on the sidewalk before scanning the dusty lot toward the tiny garage. His gaze locked onto the fading hand-painted sign, Elijah's Independent Engine Service. He stared at the words once, then read them again. Then he froze completely, the way someone freezes when a buried piece of their past suddenly stares them right in the face in the present. Elijah noticed him at that exact same moment. Across the empty parking lot, right through the dusty, overlooked morning light. You and I are watching two men lock eyes for the first time in 6 years. Neither of them dared to make a single move. Elijah refused to step forward, and Lucas simply could not look away. 6 heavy years of silence filled the pavement between them, saying way more than either guy could have ever managed to express out loud. Lucas looked exactly like someone who had just remembered a deep truth he had been, arranging his entire successful life around trying to actively ignore. Elijah's hardened expression did not change. He stared back with a total lack of anger, an emptiness that is honestly much more devastating than any screaming match could be. There wasn't a single accusation there. Just cold recognition and a deep patience that had survived 6 hard years, fully prepared to outlast this powerful executive, too. Lucas finally walked across the lot. He stopped 6 feet away, completely silent, staring at that rundown garage entrance like it was a haunted door he had been dodging his entire adult life. When the CEO spoke, his voice was quietly controlled. The strained tone of a guy hiding massive secrets right beneath the surface. "I didn't know," he muttered. "Not this property. I didn't know it was yours." Elijah studied him for a second, keeping that exact same overlooked, unhurried calm. "But you knew other things," he said. "We both know it wasn't an accusation. It was just a simple hard truth offered up. No anger, which made it hit way harder than any corporate accusation. In this rundown lot, there was absolutely nothing to fight." Lucas didn't say a single word. He stared at the faded sign once more, then at the dirt, then back to Elijah. He looked exactly like a man standing on the edge of a huge choice he had been dreading for a really long time, suddenly realizing he had completely run out of road to stall on. "Come with me inside that overlooked garage." Diana had been grinding since 6 a.m. While Elijah stalled the big suits outside, she hid in the back, duplicating the files. 3 physical drives plus 1 cloud backup on a secure server. And a hard copy paper trail, sealed tight for the patent lawyer she had dialed up from this very shop 2 nights prior. She moved steadily, never wasting a single motion. Just like always when time was ticking and this hidden breakthrough was totally irreplaceable. By the time the corporate suit came back to say the legal objection held up, delaying the eviction for at least 24 more hours, Diana was totally done. She slipped out the side door, a heavy canvas bag slung over one shoulder, giving Elijah a quick, silent nod as she passed him on the pavement. The demo crew packed back into their trucks. Lucas lingered a second longer near the edge of the dingy lot, staring at the rundown shop, his blank face shifting into something that could, with just a little more time, turn into a real choice. Elijah watched him leave, then turned back to his humble shop and stepped inside. Brewed some cheap coffee and sat at his worn bench, staring at the old tools on the pegboard, each one resting in its faded outline. Everything exactly where it belonged in the mess. He poured 6 hard years into building this place. You see, he never once gave up on the brilliant secret in that back room. But because doing honest, dirty work every single day was its own kind of proof. The clock kept ticking, 24 hours left on the board. The phone rang at 1:17 in the morning. The caller ID wasn't saved in Elijah's phone, but something about that late hour and the heavy silence made him listen with sharp focus, instead of the groggy haze of a guy just woken up. "It's Lucas," the tense voice said. Elijah sat up in the pitch black and stayed quiet, a heavy answer all its own. "I have something you need," Lucas pressed on, sounding tight and entirely uneasy. The voice of a corporate guy who practiced a brutal talk in the mirror, only to learn the real thing is a completely different beast. Project Absorption. That was their secret label for folding your engine design right into the corporate machine. I pulled the whole file, the approval chain, signed names, exact dates and timestamps on every single message. The core order that intentionally buried your patent under fake legal delays. It goes all the way up." He finally stopped. Elijah pressed the phone to his ear, staring at the cracked ceiling. "Why now?" he asked. The line went quiet for just long enough to feel completely painfully honest. "Because I saw your sign today," Lucas finally told him. "So what do we make of this?" The raw truth arriving 6 years late, finding that rusty door still wide open. For 40 minutes, they talked. Lucas joined Meridian as a tech lead before they pushed Elijah out into the cold. After Elijah lost everything, Lucas climbed right up to Chief Technical Officer. The executives handed him the finished engine file to put straight into mass production. Lucas realized immediately that the brilliant technical journals attached to it didn't come from any shiny corporate lab. The motor architecture was simply flawless, way too perfectly engineered for standard corporate research and development. It carried the soul of one brilliant mind toiling in the shadows for years. Lucas knew exactly whose stolen genius he was holding, and he made his choice. "I can't undo what I did," Lucas confessed, "but I can tell you what I know in writing on record, in front of whoever needs to hear it." Elijah asked for his terms. Lucas laid them out plainly. He promised to sign the sworn paperwork and act as a cooperating witness once that physical garage prototype was fully verified by an outside tech expert and processed through proper legal channels. He needed absolute certainty his confession wasn't the only ammunition, that the hard, greasy evidence from the shop backed up his story entirely. Then he warned, "The IPO is the day after tomorrow. If you are going to do this, it has to be tomorrow night. Once the offering closes, Meridian's legal resources triple overnight. They will tie this up for years if they get past the IPO." Elijah said he completely understood. "You and I know greatness starts here." Elijah walked to his dusty workbench, flicked the lamp on, and grabbed printer paper. He scribbled names and times, mapping out his fight against the giants entirely by hand. Just how he always tackled the most impossible engine problems. Not because the ink somehow made the stakes more real, but because charting the blueprint always exposed exactly where the system could break. They faced one massive weak spot. His revolutionary prototype was still locked inside that overlooked garage. Fortunately, Lucas could bypass the fancy new electronic locks using his top-level administrative passwords as Chief Technical Officer. A loophole that would completely vanish the second he stopped playing nice with Meridian. Meaning they only had a tight 18-hour window to pull this whole thing off. He dialed Diana at 2 in the morning. She picked up fast, clearly waiting for it. Hearing the plan, she said, "I know where the IPO event is tomorrow night. Every person who needs to hear this will be in the exact same room." Elijah thought about that flashy corporate scene. "That's not where I plan to take it," he said. "I know," Diana said softly, "but it's where it will do the absolute most." The heavy silence that followed wasn't fear or hesitation. It was the quiet acceptance of a man realizing his 6 years of hidden greasy labor were finally about to hit the big stage. Finally taking a concrete shape. Something they never predicted, yet both recognized completely. Tomorrow night, Elijah finally agreed. The Grand Meridian Hotel sat at the very peak of the city's richest financial district tower. Now picture the scene at that pre-IPO investor reception. That 32nd floor ballroom screamed the polished arrogance that makes billionaires open up their wallets. Fancy tables draped in crisp white linen with expensive spotlights hitting a massive backstage. And you and I know that fancy reception bar was doing serious heavy lifting. Let's look inside. 200 deep-pocket investors on the list. 14 managing directors representing the biggest money in town. Even the regional exchange authority sent their representatives. Add about 30 finance reporters who held the golden passes to get past. Those heavy doors, stepping near folks itching to hype up the absolute biggest new tech launch this entire city had witnessed in years. Evelyn glided across the floor like a CEO who owned the world, pacing herself perfectly. She had that slick corporate charm, making every single suit believe they were the only VIP in the building. 3 weeks out from a massive IPO, she built a powerful empire. Tonight was just watching that rich empire do exactly what empires do when everything runs smoothly. She had absolutely no reason to sweat the small stuff. In fact, she felt entirely untouchable right then. Up on the main stage, the glowing Meridian Motors logo shined bright and soft against a massive dark screen. Glossy, huge, and designed to impress all the rich folks holding empty checkbooks. She caught a glimpse, soaking up a quiet second of pure corporate pride. Then she smoothly worked the next crowd. Lucas showed up playing the part of her loyal chief technical officer. He was supposed to give a slick 7-minute pitch tailored for Wall Street and stand by ready for private chats all night with any wealthy backer looking to dig into the Ace engine specs before writing a check. He had memorized this exact corporate script before he knew the lies. He built her presentation, but he never actually planned to show it. Now here is where you and I find the real truth, 3 blocks away in a beat-up rented van. Elijah sat quietly in the passenger seat, the ignition cold. Strapped onto a heavy dolly right behind him sat the true grease-stained prototype. He hauled it out of his rundown shop at 11:45 last night. Lucas used backdoor access to override the slick Meridian security. A ragtag crew of 4, Elijah, Diana, and a smart patent lawyer, plus a freelance engineer they dragged out of bed at the final hour, who stared at Elijah's actual engine in dead silence for 20 minutes before signing off. They carefully tracked every single piece of that gritty build, checked it perfectly against 3 distinct copies of Elijah's worn notebooks and raw blueprints. That stamped proof, signed by the expert, rested safely inside the lawyer's bag. Diana walked into that ritzy hotel at 8:45, holding press badges and a cheap bag hiding 12 sealed document envelopes, each one hiding a 16-page truth bomb, a direct match showing Elijah's old shop notes against Meridian's stolen patent claims. Lucas's leaked internal files, backed up by the strict word of the outside engineer. She knew exactly which 12 reporters in that ballroom were hungry enough to listen. She tracked them down within the first 20 minutes. We watch her stay quiet, handing each the hard proof. You and I know greatness rarely starts in ballrooms, but at 9:15 the host demanded attention anyway. Lucas stepped onto the stage. He lingered at the podium before cracking his laptop open. The whole room fell into that heavy, expectant silence a room full of wealthy investors gets when they expect to hear exactly what they want. The massive screen behind him flashed the sleek Meridian logo. Lucas stared at his polished slides, then slowly scanned the wealthy crowd. I was asked to speak tonight about the core design of the adaptive compression engine, he announced. His tone was steady, carrying zero trace of fear. He sounded like a man who finally chose the truth over the crushing weight of a corporate lie. The ACE system is central to this pitch. Every single investor here was promised that Meridian Motors created and owns this groundbreaking engine design. I've been one of the very executives selling you that story. He stopped speaking for 2 full seconds. That is false. I know, because they handed me the stolen blueprints and ordered me to make them Meridian's property. Tonight, I refuse to keep playing this game. Nobody in the elite crowd reacted right away. 3 agonizing seconds dragged by. It takes a moment for a room full of powerful people to fully process a truth that completely shatters their carefully constructed, multi-million-dollar reality. Then swift and hushed chaos swept through the space. Countless urgent whispers erupted. Shocked executives slammed their crystal glasses down. The federal securities regulators sitting at the absolute closest table traded a sharp look of undeniable legal recognition. Over by the bar, the ruthless CEO Evelyn heard every single word. She caught it all. Setting her drink on a tray, she froze like a statue. The heavy side doors of the ballroom swung open. Watch this with me. Elijah wheeled in a rusted dolly, carrying his hidden prototype under a dark tarp. The single dad was still covered in garage grease. Dressing up to impress billionaires didn't matter to him. The wealthy crowd instinctively parted as he rolled his machine forward. It wasn't some flashy, perfectly timed Silicon Valley entrance. People just stepped back because a gritty mechanic was shoving a massive, heavy cart through their pristine corporate party. He planted himself right in the middle of everything. Reaching down, he ripped the dark canvas off his life's work. The breakthrough engine sat beneath the fancy chandeliers, bolted to a crude steel frame, looking just as it had in his overlooked, dusty garage for the past 6 years. It wasn't polished or sleek. It didn't reflect the fancy spotlighting like Meridian's stolen, mass-produced corporate parts always did. You and I know what that is. Pure, honest brilliance. Every trained engineer standing there realized the sheer magnitude of his innovation within 10 seconds. Elijah locked eyes with Evelyn across the silent room. She stared right back at the man she tried to ruin. For the first time ever, the untouchable CEO didn't look like someone plotting her next ruthless move. He didn't walk over to her, and he never even raised his voice. But his words sliced through the air, perfectly clear so no one could possibly misunderstand his warning. You signed the order to bulldoze my struggling garage without checking what I was building. That was your one fatal error. He held her stunned gaze for a long moment. That was it. The CEO stayed completely silent. Not because she couldn't speak, but because no corporate spin could save her stolen engine monopoly now. The exchange officials were already on their feet. Diana was snapping pictures of the overlooked engine design, while 14 reporters opened their notebooks. A legal director from a major backing firm rushed for the exit, whispering frantically into his phone. Elijah stepped back from his overlooked garage prototype and waited. He had waited 6 long years in that dusty garage. A few minutes meant absolutely nothing. 3 months dragged on exactly how world-shifting months usually do. Loud procedural legal battles echoed in the foreground, masking a slow creeping reality behind the scenes. A quiet, relentless shift of truth and power underneath it. The corporate initial public offering halted the morning after the reveal. The authorities stepped in at the Grand Meridian Hotel. Everything paused for a massive patent ownership investigation. Wall Street backers pulled out without uttering a single word. Massive institutional investors took their money and quietly vanished overnight. The Underdog's engine patent was fully restored by federal authorities. His administrative review held up, backed by 14 dense technical journals. The gritty hardware logs and independent engineering tests proved everything, along with the internal corporate theft file from Lucas, and that original time-stamped filing that miraculously survived the corporate purge became the ultimate key. Let's look at this together. The examiner called it a bulletproof record, proving he built it first. The brilliant, greasy prototype was locked away in certified storage. The breakthrough engine patent sat in trust during the legal battle, which simply meant nobody. Neither the giant corporation nor the struggling dad could sell the tech until ownership was settled. Elijah accepted this without hesitation. A small price, he could wait. Evelyn gave up her powerful CEO title during a rushed board meeting 10 days later. The swift boardroom vote happened entirely behind closed doors, avoiding media frenzy. She wasn't forcibly escorted from the massive building. She strolled out of the huge automotive tower that Wednesday afternoon, wearing the icy, calm face of an elite executive who finally accepted defeat and decided to walk away without throwing a tantrum. Federal financial crimes investigators quickly followed. They were just 2 weeks behind her, fueled by the explosive testimony Lucas had willingly provided. The massive civil and criminal trials would drag on for years. The final verdict remained unwritten, but the bones of her giant automotive empire, that $2 billion kingdom built on stolen garage secrets nobody was meant to ever find, was already collapsing completely at its most critical foundational joints. Lucas took a plea deal demanding absolute honesty about the theft. He gave them the paper trail to avoid serious prison time. He abandoned the giant corporation that very week. His name went down in the federal logs as a helpful witness, not the main corporate villain. Was this actual justice or just partial? You and I know corporate justice is often much messier than that. But nobody who watched that overlooked garage mechanic win really cared to debate it anymore. He stepped up when it truly counted, even if he was late. Stick with me here. Both of those facts were true at once. Diana's deep dive investigation published across 3 national magazines. It read like a historical record, not just a flashy breaking news headline. Methodical, perfectly sourced. Built solid enough to hold up in court, while still informing the everyday reader. She tracked the federal trials for 3 more months before chasing her next story. Exposing the Meridian CEO had taken 2 full years. Over that time, she learned to trust the quiet, unglamorous patience that brings real breakthroughs. That demolition order on Elijah's garage, canceled indefinitely. The second Meridian's mega project got frozen under federal review as part of the massive fraud investigation. They finally unsealed that rolling steel door on a Tuesday. The corporate keypad was tossed, replaced by Elijah's heavy, rusted old padlock. The overlooked little shop went back to business with zero fanfare. Elijah repainted his front sign that Saturday, same cheap brush, exact same colors. The same crooked letters that proved this was just a humble overlooked auto shop. a single dad's bare hands and hard work. His name stamped on a garage he built through 6 years of completely ordinary mornings. He hung up his wrenches and straightened those flickering fluorescent lights. Then he brewed cheap coffee on a dirty hot plate near his side workbench. Diana walked in mid-morning, holding 2 fresh coffees from across the street. She paused right there in the doorway, scanning the dusty main bays, then staring into the back room. The tarp was gone, the test stand was empty. Those shelves only held his greasy notebooks and an ancient computer waiting to be boxed up. Without that revolutionary prototype engine, the space felt tiny and strangely much cleaner. It had that quiet look of a space that finally released its massive secret. You and I should pause here with her, taking in this entire unremarkable garage. Faded pegboard walls, peeling charts, worn-out tools resting inside their traced outlines. She realized that for a space hiding the biggest industry breakthrough of our generation, it looked exactly like the gritty, overlooked spot it always was. Just a struggling auto shop, tucked on a quiet road run by a single dad turning wrenches. "What do you do with the Ace design now?" she asked him. Elijah took his cup, letting his eyes wander past the open bay doors toward the crumbling street outside. The rusty freight depot across the road. Pale morning light warming the asphalt, just the ordinary world doing its everyday grind. "Build it for real," he replied, this time not to prove a point. From out in the main service bay, the steady rumble of an engine pierced the quiet. An old 4-cylinder sedan a neighborhood customer left yesterday, begging for a quick fix. It idled with a tiny uneven rattle, the exact kind of hidden spark plug misfire most people would completely overlook anyway. Elijah instantly turned toward the noise. He placed his coffee on the bench, grabbed a blank diagnostic sheet from the stack, and walked right back to work. The bay doors were open, his daily work was waiting. Nothing was taken that couldn't be rebuilt from forgotten scrap. And words weren't needed. The morning light hitting those overlooked engine parts had said everything.